Hello! In this video, we're talking about Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chizmar. Let's go. What's up, everyone? My name is Luke, and this is a book review. But before we get into the book review, I have a little bit of a preamble. It won't take long. I promise, it won't take long. In 2022, I read Gwendy's Button Box by Richard Chizmar and Stephen King. It's a very good book, very short book, and it's actually part of a series. So I went out and got the second one, Gwendy's Magic Feather. Not written by Stephen King, just Richard Chizmar, and I loved it. Two things happened. One, I never cared if Stephen King came back to the series. And that says so much from a guy like me who just adores Stephen King. But Richard Chizmar's writing is so good. It's got such a unique flavor to it. The pacing of his writing is so smooth and natural. Nothing feels sudden or abrupt. It feels like, not to wax too poetic, but it feels like a pleasant walk on a fall afternoon. That's kind of how his writing feels. It's just this smooth conveyance of story. And it all feels very natural and comfortable, and it's weird. I'm having a tough time describing it outside of hyperbole, but you should just give it a shot. It's really good. The other thing that happened is I went to the bookstore and got Chasing the Boogeyman, just because it was the only Richard Chizmar that was on the shelf. I had no idea what it was about, but I was warned by an employee there that Richard Chizmar is the protagonist. And they said, the employee, that they didn't like it when authors self-inserted themselves into stories. And I get it. That's a valid critique. But we'll come back to that in just a second. The other thing I wanted to say was that Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, if you haven't read this, you should read this. Such a good book. It's written by John Berendt, and it is fantastic. It's a great novel. It turns out to be true crime. It's really weird. You read this book and you do not think true crime because it's written so well as a novel. It's written with this flavor of fiction and you can't shake it. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. I know that when my wife was working at a library, a patron came in and asked for it because they couldn't find it in the fiction section. So my wife went with her to the fiction section and they looked through it together, like good librarian assistants do. Couldn't find it. So they go back to the computer, they look it up in the system, it turns out, hey, nonfiction. And isn't that a surprise? It's such a well-written piece of fiction that just happens to be true crime. Chasing the Boogeyman is the exact opposite of that. It's a very cleverly written book that is fiction written as true crime, as opposed to true crime written as fiction. It's just so interesting and intriguing. If you are an aspiring writer, you should absolutely read this book because the construction of it is so intricate and clever that you can't help but be impressed by it. And if you're just a reader who likes true crime stories, you would like this book because it has all of the true crime tropes. And Richard Chizmar is the protagonist in this book, but that makes sense because the story follows Richard Chizmar as he graduates college, goes back to his hometown to start, gathering a foothold with his writing. His fiance is going through college, finishing up her degree, and murders start to happen in his hometown, and he becomes kind of obsessed and does some amateur gumshoeing. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't ring true if we're talking about a book being written as true crime. It wouldn't ring true if it was a different protagonist written by Richard Chizmar. That wouldn't make any sense. It would automatically pull you out of the story. So he's in it, and it makes sense. Probably the only time that I've ever read a book with an author self-insertion in it that made sense and didn't feel like, like masturbation, I guess. It's always weird when in fiction stories, suddenly the author themselves are there and why? Why are they there? I don't want to get off track. The story is so true to true crime. It has the same beats. It has the same feel, where you not only follow the crimes and the reactions to the crimes, go to the funerals, the growing memorials. You witness the world as it reacts to the murders, like you would find in true crimes. But in a lot of true crime books, you have the author explaining their own feelings through it. Like, all of the murders happen through the lens of the author, and that makes sense. Richard Chizmar talks a lot about how he grew up in this town and what it was, what it is, and it has a very authentic feel to it, mostly because a lot of the stories in it are true. Richard Chizmar just dug into his past for them, and it benefits the story. It's really, really good. It also has an ending that is very true crimey, and it even has pictures. Like, I like this attention to detail. I like that he went that extra step. It's very interesting. And for the longest time after I read it, I was thinking, oh man, how much do I want to say about this book regarding its construction? Because when you read it, you can't help but get wrapped up in the true crime feel of it, because it's written so well that you think, I know that he said that this is fiction, but I'm thinking that maybe he's lying. Like, maybe this is true crime, you know? You can't, like, I could not find a place where I was like, this is absolutely 100% fiction. It feels like fiction, because none of it did. It all felt legit, and it was very impressive about that. And it's kind of a surprise, the quality of that writing. And I was on the fence about sharing that, about talking about the construction of the book. But then I thought, if you went to a library, or if you went to a bookstore and you were looking for this book, where would it be? Not in the true crime section, or not in the nonfiction section. It would be under thriller or fiction or horror if they wanted to get really crazy. It's not a horror book. So I figured that that's not really a spoiler then. If you could go to the store and find what genre it is, then it's not a spoiler. I will say that it is a very good book, and you should absolutely read it. I'm really excited to read the sequel to it, Becoming the Boogeyman. That's one of my next reads, probably after the next King that I read. It's really worth reading. There's no other way around it. It's a really quick read. It's a really fun read. If you like true crime, you should absolutely read this book to see what a fictitious true crime book would feel like. And if you like fiction about crime, then you should read this to see how this feels for the exact same reason. It's really, really interesting. The story is good. The writing is superb. The construction is very intricate and true to feel. I don't know what else to say. It's a fantastic book, and you should absolutely read it. So, Chasing the Boogeyman, Richard Chizmar. Go to the store, go to the library, check it out. It's super good. That's all I gotta say. Until next time, thank you very much. Goodbye.